role singers, or she was crazed anyway, that she lived and breathed for the chance to get close to them, and that she did know many of them intimately.
She's been with Frank Zappa, Mick Jagger, Don Johnson, Keith Moon, and Waylon Jennings. Her name is Pamela DeBar, and she's written a book called Confessions of a Groupie. Pamela joins us now to talk about her life then and now. Hi, Pamela.
Hi.
I guess a groupie is what we all think it is, a girl who shows up backstage and hangs out with the stars and follows them from town to town.
That's one description of a groupie, yes.
What would be your description?
Well, the word groupie came into being long after I was doing these things. But
you were a pioneer in
yeah.
in groupiedom, were you?
But it actually just means a girl who likes to spend time with the guys in rock groups. Not necessarily sexually, but a lot of times you just want to be backstage, just involved in that scene. It's so exciting.
But if you are a girl who's allowed backstage to be with the rock stars, isn't it pretty much taken for granted that you're available for them?
Quite often that is the case. But, you know, you can establish a reputation for yourself, and that, you know, doesn't have to be the case. I went after specific members of, I mean, I didn't just go for any guy in a band.
I see.
It was very specific. It had to be someone's music I loved, something that drew me to them. I mean, it wasn't just anybody.
Who was the first for you? Who were you attracted to first?
Well, the Beatles, Paul McCartney.
And had you ever seen Paul McCartney?
No, this was when he first came on the scene, the Ed Sullivan Show and all of that.
And how old were you at the time?
About 15 and a half.
And didn't you go through some sort of Paul McCartney ritual every night?
Oh, yes, it was so funny. Well, there was a lot of the things I had to do, but one of them was I had to hear the Beatles, the last sound I heard before I went to sleep. So if the dog barked or a truck went by or anything like that, I would have to get up out of bed, put the Beatles on for a couple seconds and then get back in bed. And many of those silly rituals.
You were probably up all night at times, huh?
And it didn't work. I never met Paul McCartney, so
now, if
it says a lot for those rituals.
Sets out to be a groupie, how does she get there? How does she get backstage? How does she get acquainted with a rock star?
Well, you know, that's a hard question for me because I lived in Hollywood at the time. And the Sunset Strip was the only place to be then. So I was there, and so were a lot of the guys in these groups. The Doors, the Buffalo Springfield, the Byrds, a lot of the local bands were just hanging out on the Sunset Strip also. So you could meet them that way.
Pam, we're showing some pictures of you now with people.
That's Keith Moon from The Who, dressed up in drag. He had many, many personalities. I was Alice Cooper. I was a platinum blonde at the time. I've been every color in the world. This is Don Johnson. This was just taken real recently.
Now, you speak highly of Don Johnson. You lived with him for about a year, is that right?
Yeah, we're still real good friends, and that was real important to me with these men that I was crazy about. I wanted to maintain a friendship with them. I didn't just want to spend a night with them.
You're pretty graphic about some of their skills in bed. Were any of them offended? Don Johnson, you talked...
He was not at all offended. He laughed his butt off when he read this book. He said, how do you remember all this stuff? But of course I kept diaries.
For some of us, the word groupie has negative connotations. Right. We think of somebody who probably is not a nice girl.
I think I'm a real nice girl.
How do you start?
We're certainly nice to a lot of rock musicians anyway.
Do you have...
They were nice to me, too.
When you have these relationships, though, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
I'm just wondering, do you always sleep with them when you're a groupie? Or sometimes you're just friends with them?
Most of these guys I was friends with. When I was in I had my own band called the GTOs. It was an all-girl band. And they would come to town and look us up. They wanted to hang out with us. They wanted to go to parties with us, clubs, concerts. We took them to the best stores for records. In fact, most of them I didn't sleep with. I wanted to, have friendships with them. And for instance, Frank Zappa was my mentor. He produced my band. I lived at his house, took care of his children. I certainly wasn't a groupie for him, you know what I mean?
What did your parents think about all this?
They thought I was a nut.
No, but
they worried about me.
Were they worried?
My mom was very disturbed. This was an unprecedented era, the 60s.
You have a daughter yourself now?
No, I have a son.
Oh, suppose you had a daughter now, and she were, say, 15 and a half and starting to do the things you did at that age. How would you feel about it? You wouldn't like it?
Well, it's a different time. When I was out there doing this, of course my mom was scared and everything, but there was no AIDS. There was no herpes. It was safer on the street. John Lennon hadn't gotten shot yet. It was not a hard, it was the peace love really permeated the air. It was a real feeling, that peace love thing.
There's
it really
a curious story that you wrote in your book about John Lennon. I found it curious. You were in love with Paul McCartney, and you said during the concert that John Lennon looked down at a group of you with disdain.
No, he rode by in a limousine.
He rode by in a limousine.
And I was, oh my God, there's John Lennon, there's John Lennon. But he looked over, and it wasn't at us with disdain. It was a real sorrowful sorrow and contempt, and just almost, he was upset at being in the position he was put in.
Mm-hmm. Who was the most disturbed rock
Keith
singer?
Moon. Yeah.
And you spent about a year with him?
Yeah, off and on, a couple of years off and on. He was one of my very best friends. We had a relationship, but, you know, there's a lot of other things involved. He had many, many personalities. He was always trying to dodge himself. So he created all these amazing personalities and did these fantastic stunts, really, just to escape himself.
What about
You've seen a lot of the big rock
He was
stars,
great,
including Mick Jagger.
Right.
What did these guys have in common? In what way are they the same?
They're all magic.
Magic.
Yeah. The musicians were magic to me. They were creating this music that just sent me spinning, you know, and they're all magic. They're all putting out this stuff. The kids were gobbling it up.
Terrific. Okay.
Thank you, Pamela.
Thank you.
Thank you, Pamela, very much. Thanks for being with us.